"What is this business about the rats?" "I don't know. It's particular. But it will pass." Then, very quickly, he asked her to forgive him. He should have been looking after her, and he neglected her a lot. She shook her head, as though telling him to be quiet. And he added, "Everything will be better when you come back. We'll start again." "Yes," she said, her eyes shining. "We'll start again." A moment later, she turned away from him and stared out the window. People were pushing and shoving each other on the platform. They could hear the hissing of the steam engine. He called his wife by her first name, and when she looked around, he saw her face was bathed in tears. "No," he said softly, her smile slightly strained, returning breaths the tears. She sighed deeply and said, "Go now, everything will be all right." He hugged her, and then on the platform outside the window he could see nothing except her smile. "Please," he said, "take care of yourself." But she could not have heard him. On the station platform near the exit, Rayu ran into M. Othon, the examining magistrate. Holding his little boy by the hand, the doctor asked if he was going somewhere. Othon, tall, dark, half resembling what used once to be called the man of the world, half an undertaker, replied in a friendly but brisk manner, "I'm waiting for Madame Othon, who has been away paying her respects to my family." The engine whistled. "Rats," said the judge. Rayu made a movement towards the train and then turned to leave the platform. "Yes," he said, "it's nothing." The only thing he recorded in that moment was the station guard walking past with a packing case full of dead rats under his arm. On the afternoon that same day, as he was starting his surgery, Rayu had a visit from a young man, a journalist who, he was told, had already called to see him in the morning. His name was Raymond Rambont. Short and stocky, shoulders and a dentuman face and clear, intelligent eyes. Rambert wore spotty clothes that seemed at ease with the world. He came straight to the point. He was doing an investigation for a large Parisian newspaper and the living conditions of the Arabs, and wanted information about the state of health. Rayu told him that the health was not good, but before going any farther, he wanted to know if he could tell the journalist the truth. "Certainly," the other man said. "I mean, can you make an unqualified indictment?" "Unqualified? No, I have to say I can't, but surely there wouldn't be any grounds for unqualified criticism." Rayu gently answered that a total contamination would indeed be groundless, but that he was asked the question merely because he wanted to know if Rambert's report could be made unreservedly or not. "I can only countenance the report without reservation, so I shall not be giving you any information to contribute to yours. You're talking the language of Saint Just," the journalist said with a smile. Without raising his voice, Rayu said that he knew nothing about that, but that it was the language of man weary of the world in which he lived, yet who still had feelings for his fellow man and was determined for his part to reject the injustice and any compromise. Rambert hunched his shoulders, looking at the doctor. "I think I understand," he said, at last getting up. The doctor accompanied him to the door. "Thank you for talking like that." Rambert seemed irritated. "Yes," he said, "I understand. Forgive me for bothering you." The doctor shook his hand and told him that there was an intriguing report to be written about the number of dead rats that were turning up in the town at the moment. "Ah," Rambert explained. Now that does interest me. At 5 in the evening, as he was going out on a new round of houses calls, the doctor passed a man on the stairs. He was young despite his heavy build, large pock-marked face, and thick eyebrows. The doctor had met him once or twice in a flat of a Spanish dancer who lived at the top floor of the block. Jean Treilloux was earnestly smoking a cigarette, watching the last throes of a rat giving up a ghost on the stairs at his feet. He looked up at the doctor with a calm, slightly intense look in his gray eyes. He said good evening and added that the appearance of the rat was particularly a thing. Yes, Treilloux answered, but it's starting to become annoying. In a sense, the doctor was only in a sense, and never seen anything like that at all, but I find it interesting, yes. Delicately interesting. Treilloux ran his hand through his hair and pushed it back. Took another look at the rat, which was now motionless, and smiled at Treilloux. But when it comes down to it, doctor, it's chiefly a matter for the concierge. As it happened, the doctor found the concierge at the entrance of the house, leaning against the wall near the front door, with an expression of weariness on his normally florid face. Yes, I know, said Michel. Told Treilloux about the letter mentioned the new discovery. They're turning up in 2s and 3s now. But it's the same in other buildings. He seemed worried and despondent. He was rubbing his neck in a medical way. Treilloux asked how he felt. The concierge answered that, of course, he couldn't say he was ill, but that, even so, he was not feeling quite himself. In his view, in the matter of the morale, the rats had been a shock to him, and everything would be much better once they had gone. The next morning, however, April 18th, the doctor would bring his mother from the station, found M. Michel looking even more poorly. From the cellar and attic, where there were dozens of rats laying on the stairs. The dustbin of the neighbors' houses were full of them, and the doctor's mother was not surprised when he told her. Things like that happened. She was a little silver-haired woman with soft dark eyes. I'm glad to see you again, Bernard, she said. The rats can't change that. He agreed. It was true that with her, everything would seem easy. Even so, Treilloux phoned the district rodent control service, where he knew the director. He had heard about the rats, which were emerging in large numbers and dying in the open. Yes, Mercer, the director had been informed. They had even discovered more than 50 of them in his own office, which were not far from the port. Yet he wondered how serious it was. Treilloux could not give an opinion on that, but thought the rodent control service should do something. We can, Mercer said. With an order, if you really think it's worthwhile, I'll try and get one. I think you should, said Treilloux. His cleaner had just told him that they had picked up several hundreds of dead rats in large factories where her husband worked. In any event, it was around the time that the townspeople started to become concerned. Indeed, from the 18th onward, factories and warehouses began to produce hundreds of bodies of rats. In some cases, people were obligated to finish the creatures off, and if they were taking too long to die. But from the outskirts of the center of the town, wherever Treilloux happened to go, and wherever the fellow citizens gathered, piles of rats were waiting in the dustbins or in the long rows of the gutters. That was the day and evening papers picked up on the matter and asking the civil authorities indeed to do something. If not, and the emergency measures would they plan to protect the public from the disgusting infections. The authorities had not considered or planned anything at all, but staying by holding a council meeting to discuss it. An order was given the rodent control service to collect the dead rats every morning at dawn. When the collection was over, 2 of the servant vans should take the animals to the waste incineration plant and have them burnt. Despite this, in the days that followed, the situation got worse, and the number of rodents picked up continued to increase, and the harvest was greater morning. After 4 days, the rats started to emerge in groups and die. They came up from the basement, the chubby holes, cellars drained in long swaying lines, and staggering in the lights collapsed dead right next to the people. At night in corridors and the side streets, one could clearly hear the tiny squeaks as they expired. In the morning on the outskirts of the town, you would find them stretched on the ground while a little forest of blood was pouring out of their muzzles. Some blown up and rotting, others stiff, their whiskers still standing up. In the town itself, you found them in small heaps on landings or in the courtyard of houses. They also came to die, one by one, in council offices, schoolyards, sometimes in the terrace of cafes. Our fellow citizens were amazed to come across them in the busiest parts of town, the parade grounds, the boulevard, the seafront promenade, and the containment by them in intervals. Clear as the dead animals at dawn, the town got them back through the day in increasing numbers. More than one person walking in the night along the pavement would experience the feeling of ecstatic bulk of still fresh corpses under his feet. It was as though the very solid in which our houses were built was plunging itself into excess of bile, and it was living boils and absence rise to the surface, which up to then had been devouring inside. Just imagine the amazement of our little town, in which had been so quiet until then, ravaged in a few days like a healthy man whose thick blood had suddenly rebelled against him. Things got to the point where Infodoc, an agency of informants and documents all you need to know on that subject, announced in its free radio news program that 6,231 rats had been collected and burned in a single day, that 25th. The figure had given a clear meaning to the daily spectacle, and everything in the town had been in front of their eyes. Discounted them even more. Up to then, people had merely complained about rats discussing accidents. Now they saw that it was something threatening in this phenomenon, and the extent of the original in which was not yet clear to them. Only the asthmatic old Spaniard who kept rubbing his hands and repeating the senile delight, "They're coming out, they're coming out." However, on April 28th, Infodoc announced the collection of around 8,000 rats. The anxiety reached a peak in the town. People called for radical measures, accusing the authorities of inaction, and some families who had seaside homes were already taking their escaping to them. But the following day, the agency announced that the phenomenon had abruptly stopped, and the rodent control service had gathered only an insignificant amount of dead rats. The town heaved a sigh of relief. Yet it was on that same day, at 12, that Ryu, pulling in his car in front of the block of his flat, saw the concierge at the end of the street, walking along painfully, his head bent forward, his arms and legs akimbo like a puppet. The old man was holding on to the arm of a priest who the doctor recognized. It was Father Paluiller, mental Jesuit, who was very highly regarded in the town, even amongst those who cared little for anything to do with religion. He waited for them to join him. Old Mikhail's eyes were shining, and he whistled as he breathed. He had not been feeling very well and decided to get some fresh air. But snap pains in his neck and armpits and his goblin obligated him to turn back and ask for Father Panaloo's help. Things are swelling, he said. It was a struggle for me. Leaning out of his car window, the doctor ran his finger over the base of his neck. Mikkel offered him a short and wooden knot that appeared there. Go to bed, take your temperature, and I'll come to see you this afternoon. When the concierge had gone, Ryu's father asked Father Panlu what he thought about the business of the rats. Oh, must be an epidemic, the priest said. His eyes were smiling behind the glass. After lunch, Ryu had reading the telegram for the sanatorium announcing his wife's arrival when the telephone rang. It was a call from one of the former patients who was in the staff of the Hotel de Ville. For a long time, he was suffering from a narrowing of an aorta, and since he was poor, Ryu treated him for nothing. Yes, he said, you remember me, but I'm calling about someone else. Come quickly, something has happened to my neighbors. He was out of breath. Ryu thought the concierge had decided to go and see him afterwards. A few minutes later, he was going through the door in a low-built house in Rue Fabre at the edge of the town, halfway up a cold, shrieking stairway and across Joseph Grand, a civil servant, coming up to meet him. He was the man of about 15, yellow mustache, tall, bent, and narrow, his shoulders and thin lips. He's better, he said as he retrieved, but I thought he was done for. He blew his nose on the second and top floor, and on the left-hand door, Ryu heard the words, "Come in, I'm hanging," on a red chalk. They went in, and the rope was hanging from the ceiling light above the chair, laying on the side of the table, pushed in the corner of the rope, but hanging in the void. I got him down in time, Grand said, still seeming to have trouble finding his words. Even though he was speaking in very simple terms, I just happened to be going out when I heard a noise. When I saw the writing, and can I say that? I thought it was a joke, but he gave an old kind of groan. He could even say quite a sinister one. He snatched his head. Doing that must be painful. So I think, of course, I went in. And he pushed open the door and where the entrance to a bright but poorly furnished room. The little round man was laying on the brass bed, his breath heavy, and looking at the man in the bloodshot eyes. The doctor stopped and paused between the man's breasts and thought he could hear the rats squeaking, but nothing was moving anywhere in the room. Ryu went over to the bed. The man had not fallen from high enough or too suddenly. The spine was taking a blow. Of course, there was the asphyxia and would need an x-ray. The doctor gave him an injection of the camphorine oil and told him that he would be fine in a few days. Thank you, doctor, the man said in a choked voice. Ryu asked Grand if he had reported the matters to the police, and the civil servant looked uncomfortable. No, he said. Well, no, I thought that wasn't the most urgent thing. Of course, Ryu said, interrupting him. I'll do it then. But at that moment, the sick man stirred and sat up in bed, protesting that he was well and that he was in no need of the police. Don't worry, Ryu said. There's nothing much that I have to make a statement. Oh, the other man said, and laid back. He started to weep, a little sobs. Grand had been twirling his mustache for a while and went across him. Come now, Monsieur Cotard, he said, you must understand. They might say that the doctor was responsible. I mean, suppose you took it to your head and tried again. But Cotard, bent between his sobs, said that he would not try again, that he had just been a moment of panic, and that all he wanted to do was to be left in peace. Ryu wrote his prescription. Very well, he said. Let's leave and I'll come back in 2 or 3 days. But don't try anything stupid.